French President Emmanuel Macron has refused to accept the resignation of Prime Minister Gabriel Attal. He's asked Attal to remain in power until there is a new coalition in Parliament. And negotiations with that could take some time, with no party even close to the majority needed to form a government. And that means more political uncertainty ahead of the Olympics. We're just a few weeks away. Okay, let's take a deeper dive into the results from France's snap election. Joining us to discuss further, Remi Piet, a senior partner at Embellie Advisory. Remi, welcome back. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Sean. How are you doing?
Let's talk about the reaction and breakdown of the results. I think it's pretty safe to say few, if anyone, saw this coming.
Yeah, it was quite a surprise indeed. I mean, when you looked at the result of the first round, a lot of people were actually expecting the National Rassemblement National to actually hold a majority in Parliament. Maybe not a complete majority, maybe a relative majority, but most of the numbers and trends would actually point towards that direction. The truth is, when you actually look at what happened during the second round, first of all, a record-setting participation from the French population to this election, and definitely some people that actually understood and saw in the Rassemblement National the fact that they were probably not up to the job between the last the two rounds of election. We've seen quite a series of blunders and errors from a series of candidates in different constituencies that were just showing that probably the far-right movements were not able to hold power.
Yeah, let's take this apart bit by bit, because it really went to show that France does not want the far right to be in power right now. Secondly, how much does the economy play into these events? We heard in the story that it could undo everything Macron has fought for the past 7 years. And what indeed if a coalition can't be formed for months?
Yeah, I mean, those are a very good question, all of them together. I mean, when you look at the economy, first of all, the result of the French economy, apart from the deficit of the budget, are actually quite good. But there's been a lot of different reforms that were put in place by Macron that was considered very unpopular by a series of segments of population, especially reforming the pension system, reforming the unemployment system, and both the far left, right, and the left-wing parties actually were suggesting a series of coming back on those promises, potentially with a very high cost that were put a series of concerns in the markets, concerned about the decision from those parties to potentially come back on the reforms held by Macron. What do we do from now is, the situation is very complex. You have right now three different poles in a parliament, the left-wing parties, center parties, and far right, and none of them are actually looking forward at working with each other, and none of them actually have a clear agenda of common reforms that they're proposing for the country. So we're probably looking at a series of difficult time, up to for the next coming weeks and months for Macron to try to find some kind of a majority between those blocs that would try to work together, at least around a series of common reforms or policies. But that's going to be very hard to find.
Yeah, and it really is a time when France should be reveling in everything patriotic, with the Olympics coming up. So where does Macron go from here? To what degree was this just a huge mistake to call this snap election right now?
Well, actually, when you look closer at it, Macron didn't really have much of a choice. When he was elected in 2022, he didn't get a large majority in parliament just afterwards. Already, the French population was concerned about giving all the power in the hands of Macron, and so they elected him with a very, very tiny majority that has kind of slimmered away from the last 2 years, and he would have most likely faced a vote of no confidence in Parliament in October that would have triggered the election. So what he tried to do was actually to get ahead of the curve and call for those elections before the Olympic Games very quickly, so that neither the left-wing parties and the far right would be able to actually organize themselves ahead of those elections. That's what he tried to do. Unfortunately, his bet actually was not did not lead to success. The left-wing parties were able to unite, calling for the new Front Populaire, which is a very important signal in French history, and actually won those elections at the surprise of most people, showing potentially a glimmer of hopes for more reforms and more trickling down of the wealth towards the middle classes and the lower classes of the economy that have been of the population that have been suffering for a series of the reforms under Macron.
Okay, let's take a look at why the world should be focused on what is happening right now. The challenges to forming a government, all the moving pieces, and the periphery, stability in Europe, France's own constitutional order, and of course the ongoing war in Ukraine. How is that going to be affected?
So one thing that we actually learned from these elections, and clearly, is that the position of France towards Ukraine and Russia is going to remain the same. The one party that was probably definitely closer to Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin was the far right, and the Rassemblement National has a series of relations, especially with Russian banks, has been much less adamant about supporting Ukraine. And the defeat of Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella really shows the fact that the French population is backing Ukraine. Apart from this, when you look at other decisions, especially the importance of France being a leading power in the European Union, it's actually a fairly positive news for those elections, because the parties that won, both the center parties and the left-wing parties are very pro-European. And if the far right actually had won the election, that would have been trickling a series of concerns in Brussels and with neighboring countries of European countries of where France was going. So on those two levels, it seems to be in terms of foreign policy, pro-European, supporting Ukraine. Right. Those elections have clarified the situation. The problem is much more in terms of economics, in terms of what are the reforms, what is the agenda in terms of the next 3 years, and how, without trying to go back on a series of reforms that would be quite costly for the budget in France, how can you actually get some kind of a consensus over how to reform the country and the society?
Great insight. Remi Piet, as always, a pleasure, my friend. It's going to be interesting to see how the far right cools its heels for the next 3 years as well. Thanks again.
I'm looking forward to talking to you about this in the next future.
Okay.